Seems like ages.
I know it does.
Oh,
Is
I was puzzled for a moment there because I was doing recording and I heard recording in progress. I said, no, wait, I'm not recording right now. I stopped. So different recordings. So, brilliant. I was doing Biella and Camelius.
very good, very good.
Yes, it's hard to switch between their voices because they're so different. Yeah, it's quite tricky. It's quite tricky. Yeah. And then you do the narrator and everything. But it's fun though. It's fun. It's fun to do. It's fun. Brilliant. How are you, Erica? How are you?
Forever since I've talked to you, which is weird because it's
it seems like ages. I don't know, like it was a different season. Yeah. It's too amazing. It's too amazing. But anyway, I look forward to it always. I'm like, it's Tuesday. It's Erica Day. Brilliant. So yeah, I really enjoy it. Look forward to it. So fantastic. Erica, let me ask real quick before we get going. How is Kay?
Oh, she's good. She said tonight to tell you hello.
Oh, good. Hello, Kay. I miss her very much. Because she said originally that, she'll just do 1 day a week, but now it's been 2 days a week for 2 weeks. So I'm assuming that's more than what she anticipated, but that's fine. I assume all is good.
Everything is good. She's been making a lot of progress on her garage sale stuff. So she's really
good. That's deeply metaphorical, by the way.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, for Kay, there's a lot of stuff attached to all of that stuff. So that's why I understand what's going on, because it's like a clearing and a reorganization and a resorting. So the break is actually very good because it gets her to implement on her own. And, it's a huge transition period. I just want to make sure that the connectivity stays there and that she does come back at some point, because that would be very important to reconsolidate and lock all that in through the emphasis, through the different perspective sharing, and through the takeaways, the repeat backs on what she's been doing. It's very, very powerful to lock it in. Yeah, very, very cool to cement it all. Yeah.
All right. Sorry.
That's okay. I was just saying it's very important that, I just want to make sure to maintain that connectivity, because sometimes when there's a break, then people feel a bit awkward coming back or whatever. No. It's necessary. It's important. And I do look forward to it. Doesn't matter how long it takes. That's irrelevant. I just want to make sure that connection remains. That's very key. It's very key. Very important. You're looking very Mediterranean in whatever your thing is. I don't know, whatever you have on, like you.
I'm wearing Joe's jacket.
Okay. Well, it's like, you're on vacation and you just got up and
here, so I had just this little dress on.
Oh, excuse me. All right. See, very Mediterranean. Very cool. Very nice. Yeah. Very cool. Very chic, very like sophisticated, you know what I'm saying? Like you're on vacation out there near Monaco somewhere, the yacht is in the bay, and, it's very cool.
Oh, dear.
Very exciting. What's been happening with you, Erica? What's been happening with you?
Any new news on your
the property? Just doing the utilities. So I'll move on the 2nd. And then, so I'm just waiting to hear, they sent me forms, I filled in the forms. And so, I've got the internet connected. The next one that responded back after the forms has been the electricity people, which is the key. That's the one that I need, so, yeah. So I'll see, I haven't heard more since I sent back the last things, but the utilities. So I guess, they've been pretty good.
Right.
But they haven't let me know when they're coming to install it. But, at least I can go without electricity for a little while, for a long while, I guess. But still, I prefer to use that than the gas. I can't run the computer off the gas, but I won't have internet for a couple of days anyway. So, although, if I can get the phone when I was there, the phone didn't have signal, but, maybe if it's in a little bit settled, I can put the antenna a bit higher, stuff like that, because I have a booster for the cell signal. So maybe I can, because then I can use the phone as a hotspot, so I can do that. Yeah.
True. Very true. Well, good.
Yeah. It's just, temporary stuff.
Right.
Normally you can, you have a bit more grace time to do that. I don't want to stay where I'm at for another month. It's just kind of wasteful. So I'm trying to work it out exactly, get them to work on my timetable a bit. But, so it's a bit of compromise involved.
Good. Have you ever had cotton candy grapes?
Cotton candy grapes. I'm assuming you don't mean grape flavored. No, let me see that again.
No, they are cotton candy. They're grapes that taste like cotton candy.
Never had that.
Really good.
Wow. That's quite fantastic. And organic on top of it.
So they taste like cotton candy.
Yeah. Wow. Your eyes look different today, Erica, by the way.
I what?
Your eyes look different.
Oh, well.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. So that's fascinating. So they must have done some kind of, genetic engineering on it or something. Yeah.
Apparently.
Cotton candy. Wow. I haven't had cotton candy in ages. I was never a huge fan of it. I do sort of enjoy it, but not a major fan. It's like a once a year thing at the fair, and that was it. But still, that's interesting. The flavor. Wow.
It's really good. It's a very
I do like grapes and Bina. I think grapes are a favorite fruit actually.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I do. I like all the fruits, but
no, I do too. It's hard for me to.
I mean, I bought some grapes and I had to let them kind of. They were so unsweet and unflavored. They've been sitting in the fridge for almost 2 weeks now. They've gone a little bit soft already to get some sweetness into them.
Well, that's not good.
No, lately I haven't had much luck with the fruit. It's a bit disappointing, It's all been very unflavorful. So, anyway, who knows?
Not good.
Yeah, but I do like fruit. Fruit salad. Man, properly made fruit salad. That's. I think I mentioned it before, right? You got to chop it really small, add a little bit of water, sugar, the vanilla essence, a little tiny bit, just a little bit. Anyway, and a little bit of salt actually too.
Yes.
Tiny pinch of salt. Yeah, it brings out the flavor. Yeah. It gives it body, So yeah. Magical stuff. So anything happening since we last spoke in terms of just moreness and particularly dreams?
Sorry, I'm putting these grapes back.
Yeah, no problem. It's fun. I see you in the reflection back there, by the way, every now and then.
That's true.
Yeah.
Let's see. Okay, let me move you around. My computer was dying, so I had to keep it plugged in. So I'm just moving you around with me.
I gotcha. No worries.
Let's see. Anything? Oh, well, so okay. Let's see. Dreams. I have been dreaming. I know I've said before that a lot of times I end up going through these cycles where I will remember my dreams for like weeks in a row, and then I go through this dry period where I can't remember any of my dreams. And I'm kind of in this in-between phase right now where I know that I'm dreaming, but I don't exactly remember what's happening. I haven't had any particular unusual what did you call it? Hypnagogic. I haven't had anything happen with that since we spoke last. Just usual. I have been having some sleep problems again, but nothing out of the ordinary. So, but I did, I went up and looked. I tried to find the smiley face on the floor in our bedroom, and I couldn't find it. And I need to go, I've got to keep looking because I'm trying to figure out sort of where Axel's bed would have been. So I have a feeling it's probably covered up by something.
That's fantastic. That's really fantastic. Most cool. Yeah, I'm very keen to see that. Thank you for the effort. It's a big deal. And also it's revealing in terms of how our memories work.
Right. True.
Yeah.
But I did make a point to take a picture of the smiley face thing this week whenever I saw it.
Yes.
And
Brilliant. Yeah, when you see them and you know just message me. You can just send it through Messenger. Yeah.
both times this week, coincidentally, it was at the bottom of a bowl, which was funny.
A bull.
Bowl, like
Bowl. Bowl with a B as in boy. Bowl.
So I have no idea if you can see that. There's. Can you see right in the middle? There's like dot.
Yeah. Wow. So it's like a whole half moon next to it.
Sometimes it's not that. So like the other one was at the bottom of a bowl again earlier this week.
Wow.
This one is a little bit more abstract. Ooh, can you even? Okay, wait. There we go. Dot. And then this was like connected.
Yeah. I see. Wow, interesting. But the other one is very specific. The other one is more what I imagine you see more regularly, right? That type of thing.
It varies.
Yeah. But I mean, the smile part may be different, but I mean, in that, it's very clearly that, but also, you know, it's not specifically like it's been painted or printed or something. Yeah. Wow.
So,
oh, that looks delicious, by the way, whatever you're making.
Yes, it's a tofurkey sandwich.
That sounds rude. That just sounds rude. Sorry.
It actually does.
Tofurkey yourself.
It does.
Yeah. Right, and that's a good insult. Go tofurkey yourself. It's like.
It actually does taste like turkey. It's pretty good.
Oh wow. Yeah, they're getting better at it now. You know, I mean, if they can make katikan and grapes, then they can certainly make tofu that tastes like turkey. So yeah.
Absolutely.
I imagine at some point, you know, all our food will be entirely synthetic, you know, like out of the replicator on Star Trek, and it will taste just like the originals, even better. It will always be perfect, you know, and you would never ever want to eat natural food again because the fruit will be, you know, like my grapes, you know, there'll be this variation, and you can dial up your grapes, you know, to, okay, you get the grapes and you say, no, too sweet, a little less, or, you know, more sweet or whatever, till it's exactly dialed into your perfection, you know, or you can change it by the day to say, well, I do feel like kind of slightly sourish grapes, you know, or whatever, you know. It's coming, Erica, it's coming. I'm a great believer in the future. Yeah. Because, you know, when I was a kid, we're living in science fiction times now. Yeah. You know, one of the things that was always absolutely representative of the future was the video call.
The what?
The video call.
Video call. Oh yeah, true.
That was like the big thing in the future, especially on the wrist, right? Now, you know, the phones, they supplanted the wristwatch because it's too impractical, that smallness. They make them, I mean, you can get it, but you know, I always figured to make a holster, you know, to put your phone on your forearm. I guess they make them, but they don't seem to be very popular, which is interesting to me.
Like Apple watches. I mean, you can make a red call.
Exactly. But the video call, that was the big thing, you know, not just a small portable phone, but the video call, that was the holy grail of science fiction. And to me, when video calls came, I said, we are now finally living in the science fiction era, right? The science fiction is here now. We are in the future, right? Yeah. I guess the other one was hover cars, right?
True.
Yeah. That was the other holy grail, hover cars, like the Jetsons. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. No, we still.
I was thinking about this. You know, if you can have, you can make them fairly easily. I mean, all you have to do is have a magnetic road, and then you just build cars that have magnets underneath, you know, and that hover on the road. Now, it'll be very expensive to make, but you could do so, especially if you used electromagnets, you know. But still, if you can have magnetism, why can't you have anti-gravity?
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
It just seems to me that this is just an idea, something that just needs a little bit of tweaking, reconceptualizing. I see no reason why you can't do that. Now, I suspect that the problem with anti-gravity is that the thing itself repels all of its own molecules.
Right.
But then why doesn't that happen in a magnet? See? So,
right.
Yeah. I mean, if you have natural magnets, I imagine maybe you at some place you have natural anti-gravity things, but they're all out in space somewhere.
Yeah. Right. That's a possibility.
At the very ends of the universe, the whole universe is ringed by all these ever expanding. That's the anti-gravity particles keep moving away from the universe. So, but still, I don't see any reason why you couldn't create it. I really don't. I imagine it's just a matter of organizing matter in a particular format, a structure, like a magnet. So, yeah. Anyway, it has to come at some point. Well, it comes in my story, the great gravity engines, so they figure it out. It has to be. But the fun part of that is, if you look in, since we on while eating, just a fun. I like stuff that has a little bit more to it. So in the story, since it's in a different galaxy and you need faster than light travel of some kind to do that, otherwise it's not realistic. If you, what are you chuckling at there? Who's there causing trouble? You just were looking past the camera. I thought somebody's behind the computer. Somebody teasing you.
Sorry.
It's all good. All good. Your sandwich looks so good, boy. Take your time. Take your time.
It's nice and there we go. Nice and toasted. I was giggling because I was trying to remember what movie it's from. Maybe Superbad. It probably Superbad. One of the really stupid, my kind of humor, really stupid, silly movie. And Jonah Hill was in it, and when you said ever expanding, when you were talking about the gravity thing, it made me think about this. He, at some point in this, I think it's Superbad, at some point in the movie, he's sitting in a wheelchair and he makes this incredibly crass joke about Stephen Hawking. And it ever expanding things.
Brilliant. Now there's a little bit that's fantastic, because what I'm saying in terms of multi-layered, that's a multi-layered joke, because Stephen Hawking, very few people know this, it's not part of his public image, but he was an absolute hound dog when it came to women. I mean, he was just obsessed with them. And, he probably has, never mind ever expanded, was probably perpetually expanded from the way he carried on. So, so whoever did that joke probably knew this about Stephen Hawking.
What the joke was about actually was him masquerading with his nurse. So, yeah. It was
right. Brilliant. So Stephen Hawking likely would have enjoyed the joke also. Yeah, I mean, he's quite naughty, Stephen Hawking, in his own way, Anyway, so in terms of the faster than light travel, I mean, it's one of the there's a zillion theories on this of how to actually do this and how to travel to other planets. A lot of authors try to be as realistic as possible. So there's a zillion theories, and some of them actually have translated into, like the ion light sails and all this. I think the Chinese are actually using this, right? One of the theories. At any rate, so now, yes, the gravity engines, which you still have the faster than light problem, right? Because even though you use it as a measure of propulsion, where, when you're near a planet, you use it to repulse yourself, or any mass, a sun, whatever. And then when you go, when you get to the nearer the next one, you use it to attract you, right? You just change that. But that still doesn't solve the problem of the closer you get to the speed of light, the greater your mass becomes, where eventually becomes infinite, right? You can't cross that barrier. However, though, what few people realize is that gravity is connected to time.
Right.
So the great gravity engines aren't used for propulsion. They're used to change time. So the way they work, essentially, there is some actual physical travel involved because you got to put yourself in the right place. But the way they work is you put yourself in the appropriate place, you change time, and the universe changes around you. Then that's how you overcome the problem of the mass issue. I thought it's, to me, a very clever solution to the problem, right?
I remember when I was reading the Einstein biography, and I mean, I had heard the concept of like clocks that were up in space on satellites, you know, being brought back down. So like I knew that this was a concept. But they explained this so clearly in the Einstein biography, and you know, the whole space time as a fabric. You know,
exactly.
I remember that just blowing my mind, thinking about the fact that, like, I mean, speaking of sci-fi stuff, to me, that's like the ultimate sci-fi type thing to think of.
Yeah, exactly.
Like literally time can be manipulated. That is
exactly. And now you can't go back in time, but you can go forward in time.
Right.
So all the space travel in the agglomeration, you know, that universe in the Biela series, it always involves, you know, a deep commitment, because when you go on, you travel to another planet, you're leaving behind what you are because you can't come back to it. When you do come back, the people are going to be, you're going to be older, and the people may be the same, however that works out. So, you know, typically you come back and nobody you know is still there. So, you know, and then I also set it up in such a way. I wanted travel between planets to be something substantial in the days of sailing, you know, the sailboats, where, you know, you went from England to India, it took you a year, you know, or whatever, you know, it was months of travel. It was a big commitment. I thought that was kind of cool, that travel is that way. It's not just, you know, you can do it so easily, that there is a substantial investment involved. So that travel is a serious business. Now, I mean, it's not just a time commitment, but also that, you know, it's a one-way trip, essentially. You can come back to the same physical place like Nobilia, but still, it's still a major commitment. I thought that was really cool in that it makes for responsibility involved. You know, this is a big deal. It's a big deal. You have to be really, really thoughtful about it. I like that. Plus, there's another fun part. So in the great gravity engines, in order to generate that gravity, likely to me, you would involve spin of some kind. Right? You know, some at like a super fast speed thing. You know, you can imagine that centrifugal force and that generating massive gravity, you know, layers of it, multiple circles, maybe with different materials, creating different induction fields and interacting with each other in this leveraging. Now, if you design a spaceship that's got spin involved, what is the actual physical design going to look like?
Round, I would imagine.
Flying saucer, exactly. So you know, in the project, when they design it, they deliberately design, well, because they have to have it round, but of course you can have the engine inside and build it a square around it if you wanted to. It doesn't matter. But they deliberately design the ships to look like flying saucers, because the originator of the project, with his sense of humor, said, we are going to now be the aliens out there in the flying saucers. So now you get to see what it's like. And the perspective shifting involved, you know, to say, oh, aliens, and just that change of mindset that we the aliens, it made for a profound rethinking of everything. So I just thought that was really cool and fun. But there's another logic to it as well. It is that to design that saucer shape, it allows for what do you call it? Atmosphere. It allows for atmospheric travel, because when the entire outside can spin and it funnels air, right? So you use this now, you know, if you funnel air from on top of you into underneath you, you're going to create a higher pressure, which will now counteract the gravity, right? So this allows you to slowly settle down. When you need to go up, you use the same process. You create a vacuum in which the thing goes up top, right? You just reverse it. So that same design allows for, and then, when you're riding on this cushion of air pressure, you just angle the ship slightly and it'll go in whatever direction you want. So which is another reason why I imagine this is, or, you can use the gravity, do the same off the gravity, but it allows, if you maybe on a gas giant or whatever, the gravity is too strong or too weak or whatever, you don't want to use the gravity engines because you don't want to have the time effects. You can just travel using atmosphere, so it's just an extra little bonus there. So I like that multi-layeredness of it, right? It's fun. It's fun stuff. Anyhow, multi-layered, maybe that's our theme for today. It's very exciting. So you said you aren't remembering your dreams specifically, yeah?
No, okay. I'm trying to think. It seems like I remembered something from one of my dreams, like one specific thing from one of my dreams recently, but now I've forgotten it again. I
gotcha. Okay, the reason I mention it is because, we were talking about Don Juan, and, capital D dreaming was a very, very, very big deal for him. Absolutely. One of the key, like capital S, seeing, or at least I prefer to call it perceiving. Mm-hmm. Yes, he used the word seeing, but he did specifically say, he only says seeing because he's habituated to predominantly using the eyes. Right. But it's not accurate. It's perceiving. So I shifted to saying perceiving, capital P, perceiving, and specifically to perceiving energy directly, right? Mm-hmm. So as opposed to, capital P, perceiving is perception shifting and all that. But now this is direct energy perception, right? So that was that, and dreaming, and then stalking, which is, it's a poor choice of words. Stalking would just be a strategy in the real world, right? Understanding, PSP and capital D diplomacy, all of this are applications of strategy when dealing with other people. And that's what he calls stalking, capital S, stalking. So it's a poor term again, but, I'll just rather call it strategic application, right? Kind of real worldness, right? So he has those three key areas: the perceiving energy directly, capital D dreaming, and strategy, right? Real world strategy, you can call it realness. So it's very powerful, and he says these are all very powerful techniques, and the idea behind all of them is to shift you. And right. To get to realize that, the world is a description. He says that was the hardest lesson for the apprentices to learn, is to see that the world is a description. This is the most difficult challenge. Yeah, very interesting. But anyway, the reason I bring up capital D dreaming is because Bina, she was a nice, wonderful long chat on the weekend, multiple, Anyway, so she said she had set the intent to have conscious dreams, and she did. She was very excited. Yeah. So it's very, very exciting. Very cool.
I haven't done that yet. I remember we talked about that last time. And
right. So between last time and now, Bina had a dream, which is really cool.
I do want to set an intent for that, to see if I can make any change, deliberate change to a dream.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, Bina said she said it, and 3 days later she added. So it's very exciting. It's very exciting. Yeah. So I said, yeah, Bina, next thing you got to contact me in your conscious dreams. I need a nudge. I need some little bump to break my stickiness there. So, but Don Juan also said that we have these predispositions. Some people are natural dreamers, some are natural stalkers, and some are natural seers. And obviously, for me, I'm a natural stalker or a natural strategist. Right. I don't care for the term stalking, but I don't know why he used that. This comes from an old term. But, this real world strategy, unlike PSP and just, the psychology, it's all in terms of real world interactivity. So, that's my forte, my strength. But it doesn't mean that you don't develop the others as well. It's just that you have this predilection towards it. So, obviously, I would suspect that Bina is a natural dreamer, So, yeah. She's also perceived some of the energy directly too, which is really interesting. I don't know if we ever spoke about it, which it was like perceiving things as sand, seeing like it has this molecular structure, like yourself, anything. It's really cool. Yeah.
That's
So,
fun.
I will get her on. She come talk to us about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very cool. Very, very cool. Powerful stuff. Powerful stuff. All right. The other main point that I wish to emphasize is, I've just been emphasizing it with everybody, the dictionary of power and its importance. Yeah. Okay. I did, I think, already. All right. The reason too, one of it is that we are hardwired for language.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of the things that make us really unique and separate
Right.
to everything else. People think that, yes, you learn language, but no, you're also predisposed to learning language because it's hardwired in you. Like where I grew up, one of the towns, the middle town, they had the largest school for the blind and largest school for the deaf in the Southern Hemisphere. It was a very unique town, right? So you had, they were just part of life. You see them, like, they had these furrows in the streets that were used for irrigation between the street and the pavement, and the blind people would use their canes, and they would follow those furrows. They couldn't have, because it was a nice square grid in the main part of the town, very easy for them to walk around. And they had the first, there were not that many traffic lights, but the first in the world to use sound to say walk or not work. Yeah. So just little things, but this makes you realize, like, I played chess with a guy, his name was David. I got a nice cool little article about it. I think I mentioned it before, who was born, they would say back in the day he was born blind, deaf and dumb. But of course, dumb, mute doesn't mean that you cannot speak. It just means you haven't really heard yet to speak. But they taught him to speak. And, I told you, he would listen to me by putting his hand like this. It was too incredible. But here's the point though, right? It's not like he had a very limited vocabulary, not at all, right? So the reason they're able to do this is because it's in there already, right? You tapping to it, you're just connecting to it. Otherwise, I believe that would be a rather impossible task.
Right.
Yeah. So it is really, really something special, to understand this. So the Dictionary of Power utilizes, maximizes, and leverages our natural capacity for language. And when we understand that language is awareness, everything starts to fall into place. Right? Then we go even further in this multi-layered magicalness. Don Juan said the world is a description. Now, this is not a unique idea to him. It comes, you go all the way back into any spiritual tradition at some point has the same concept. That it's all mind, the mind of no mind. Oh boy, the Zen Buddhists love this thing, right? But it's an old Hindu thing, Sanskrit thing, goes all the way back. Any tradition, right? So, if you want to take it in the religious thing, we're all part of God's dream, stuff like that, right? But it's the language that makes the description, which makes the reality. So it's all part of the same mechanism. So the magic of the Dictionary of Power, because it's abstract conceptions, it allows us a tool to bridge the two. Yeah. So to deconstruct the reality in one way and shift into a mindset that's conceptualizing in the abstract, so that whether you're dealing with, hard congealed, I like to call it congealed reality, or dream reality, or fluid reality, or directly perceiving energy, makes a difference. You still have the abstract conceptions to do that. Yeah.
Right. Absolutely.
So there's a method to it, a big interconnectivity, which is very, very cool. Boy, that bread is making me hungry for bread, Yeah. Especially I'm thinking fresh bread. When I ever eat fresh bread, I always cut the slices fairly thick. The slice that they use in the supermarkets, it's too thin. Sorry. The best thing since sliced bread. No. When they started slicing bread, they messed it all up. It's the worst thing since sliced bread. Sorry, that was not a good thing.
I agree.
Yeah. When they first started to bring in, when I grew up, you never bought a sliced bread. That was it. That didn't exist, right? So then they started to introduce sliced bread, but in the supermarkets, they had a bread slicing machine, which you went and took your thing from the bakery or wherever you bought the bread, and you put it on and you let it slice. But you could adjust the size of the slices.
Wow.
Yeah. At least in the early models. I think later they standardized it. Why they decided on those idiot thin slices, I don't know. I mean, especially in white bread. And if you have white bread and butter, you start spreading that like even peanut butter, the thing breaks apart. It blows my mind. Sorry, I don't get this. I don't get how people tolerate it. It makes no sense to me. No, very bothersome. But I like that, the chewiness of those thick slices. Yeah. Yeah. And what really intrigued me too, people get all horrified. Oh, I'll make a nice thick slice. Well, twice as thick as a typical slice. I said, when you make a sandwich and you put one on top of the other, what are you doing?
Right.
What's the difference? But they're all horrified, scandalized. Oh, it's like rude. I mean, seriously, people, come on, you eat a sandwich that's two. Now it's okay. Just that kind of thinking really used to blow my mind, And, I never really thought it through, which now I do. Because I've been listening to, I told you, right? I've been listening to stories I listened to a long time ago. And this is listening with a different ear. And, it really has made me more aware of just how different my thinking is. Like that when I was a kid, I just was, every instance like that was an anomaly. I didn't put it together as a pattern, so now I see it. But which is good that I didn't see it then, because if you're too aware that you're different, it causes problems. Yeah, you need to have a sophisticated awareness to deal with the awareness of your own difference.
And
right?
That was
I'm mentioning it for you. Yeah.
Problem for me when I was younger, and I think one of the reasons that I wound up shoving so many things down into the shadow category and just ignoring it, because I had all of these unusual, not even things that, there were some things that were unusual and probably sort of problematic for me to be feeling at young ages, but even just like my learning, my learning ability that everybody always praised me for made me feel weird, because I knew that it was not normal. I could tell that it wasn't normal because, like I told you, that teacher in 4th grade who had me like get up in front of the class and give the rest of the class the stomach.
Yeah.
Feel so other, so different, so out of place. It was really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I didn't know how to deal with it.
Yeah. Adults, their loss of memory of the social dynamics of children fascinates me. Seriously, that you do not realize that this is going to cause a problem for the child. Yes, you also don't want to condone the fact that it is that, but then you need to make some allowance for it. You need to put some strategy in place that takes it off of you, that makes it a thing on her. But this is that, for me, I solve the problem by having the private self and the public self. So I was, a typical, normal, cool kid. That was it, in the public side. But privately, I did all my different and unusual stuff. And that really solved the problem. It was very cool. Appropriateness, in other words. Yeah. Very cool. I really wonder about remembering stuff. So, I feel I remembered stuff for you. Think about it a lot. I think if I were to do this again, what would, obviously, yes, I'd bring my dictionary of power into it. But what would I like to leverage in addition to that? And I'll tell you one thing I will change very distinctly, right? In the environment that I grew up, at least the way I understood it then, right? I understood the absolute necessity for appropriateness in the sense of not standing out, not being different or unusual. I do see now, if one has sufficient sophistication and discernment and discrimination and confidence, you can be radically different and not be a problem. You can be that special exception like the rules don't apply to them and not be a problem, right? But it requires a very particular combination of elements.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's to me what I think I would like to, if I ever, well, I would like to not need to do it again, but should I need to, that would be the way to do it. Where you come in and you are so independent in your being, but also strategic. You're also applying capital diplomacy, also appropriateness, also a sensitivity. And you understand how to be different, where people accept you as, oh, that's a soul. He's just unusual. Things don't apply to him. And it just, everything is just, you're just so unique. People don't know what to do with you, but because you're not a threat to them, and you just create this queuing that you're in your own wonderful world, and they sort of admire it and respect it, but they don't know what to do with it. But they just let you do your own thing, right? So I think that would be quite profound.
I agree.
But again, I think that one must be careful with such intents, because I would rather not repeat. I would rather move into alternative realities that are where the necessity for this type of thing does not, where it's different, where you can essentially choose where you want to come into the world, how long you want to be in the physical world, go into the non-physical world. Because I'm not a great fan of physical existence. I see its limitations. I definitely do. I definitely see that when you have true independence of being and you have appreciation and awe and magic, you don't need to get your joy from your physicality, which for most people, that's all they know. They don't have a deeper appreciation, awareness, sophistication, all that. They're limited. And to me, your physical joys are limited. And I think the very fact that the body deteriorates in the way that it does and your physical joys change, to me, this is an old thought. I thought when you think it through to the end, it's really, you need to make peace with old age.
Right.
And and just that, so you need to learn to find ways of joy and pleasure in your life that transcend the physical. Otherwise, you're on a downward trajectory, right? Yeah. So I thought it was a profound lesson that we needed to learn. I saw this. It was particularly in regard to sexuality that this came about. To say, look, you need to, at least to me, in the logic, when you think it through to the end, if this is the be all and the end all of your life, you like, the drug addict. They always tell you the very first hit of your drug is the be all and end all. And ever after that, you're trying to recreate the first time. You're going downward. Now, maybe with sexuality, you can learn, I would imagine not can, but most people do, they can improve, but still, you go up and then it goes back down again, right? To eventually where your body just can't deal with it anymore. And so now what? If you built your whole life around that as being the be all and end all of everything, you lose it out. And same thing with taking physical existence in its totality as the be all and end all, you're again heading for disappointment. So I thought that's a very profound life lesson built into life itself. At least for me, I want to really emphasize it's a very personal perspective, but I'm sharing the logic of it a little bit.
That makes sense.
You don't enjoy those things. Sorry.
Yeah, that makes absolute sense.
Yeah, it's just don't create a dependency on it.
Right.
That's the key. Same with food.
Right.
Don't create a dependency on it.
Absolutely.
Or any physical activity. Don't create a dependency on it. Any dependency is not good.
True.
And I think this is a big lesson to learn in terms of the path that we're on, which is the path to total and ultimate freedom.
Right.
If you cannot transcend dependency, you're never ever going to be free. But we don't pay attention to things like sexuality and food and stuff like this as being dependencies.
Right. True.
Very interesting stuff. I think also when you have real huge awareness, it somewhat mitigates against physicality.
You have real huge awareness and mitigates against.
Yeah, I mean, if you're super hyper aware, there's a lot of stuff that you now have to then learn to be deliberately unaware of.
Right.
Well, instance, I scratch my head. How many millions of little organisms don't I eliminate and kill when I do that? You can't. When you're aware of such stuff. And now, how do you see the physicality has inherent limitations for awareness? Yes, you can of course ignore that, learn to be ruthless about it, but still, it's part of that, the whole deal of life, and just the physical processes and all that. It's, always reading the science fiction books where the magnetic beings are horrified at the idea of having an organic body or whatever. I always thought that was very interesting. They're like, ew, all squishy and organic and, water bag. Oh my God, it's like horrible, and, the whole biological process. Oh my God, this is just too horrible, which, hey, there's a logic to it. So
I like it.
Also, we are so used to nature and nature's process, which is to recycle stuff, life, death. That does not necessarily have to be a process of life. Again, like the magnetic beings, they are conscious magnetic creatures, and they self-sustaining. That's it. They don't feed on anything, they just are. It just loops right around. So, there's many ways that you can be alternative mechanisms. We need to have that imagination, though, to say this paradigm that we are in, forget the superiority paradigm, it's a psychological thing, but the actual physical paradigm is also not the only potential paradigm. I like that. I really like it. It's really cool, to really jump outside the box a little bit.
Absolutely.
All right. Very good. Where were we last time?
Let's see. Go back to the last one after this. I think we got all the way through. Yeah, we got all the way through this section. So we would have been on. I don't know the slide.
We were on the core conceptions last, I thought, right?
Yeah, we went through that because that's what got us onto the discussion of the dictionary of power.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
So I think we're on
slide 17.
So without application, what's the point? The Ursula quote.
I was on slide 17, which was just a different one. It wasn't attributed. One of the core components of capital diplomacy is emphasis, a deliberate emphasis on receptivity, others and our own, creating the opportunity for more coming into awareness.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there were tasks and exercises, end module 3. Because maybe you were a bit earlier on the core conceptions. Were we still going through them then?
No, I think we had gotten through, because it said make a list of your core conceptions. And so I had made a list of things that had come to me so far. And we got through that list and we were talking about dictionary of power.
Right.
And
right. So yeah, make a detailed list with expanded understandings of all the core conceptions you use and associate with capital diplomacy. All right, we didn't do that. All right.
We talked about the expanded understandings concept and kind of doing that with dictionary of power in general and having that be like an ongoing thing.
Yes.
So, so I need to do a major overhaul on my dictionary of power.
Okay. So this task was to do it specifically for capital diplomacy. Make a sub one. But all right, so we can move on to the next module, because this is an ongoing task that you're just going to combine it with your entire dictionary of power rather than specifically.
Yeah, and we talked. I think I said last time that I don't have, up to this point, I didn't have a separate dictionary of power just for diplomacy. I had one for way of impeccability and one for just the Moreness project. So I'm going to go through and try to sort of have a
the idea of this task and exercise was to just specifically focus it and to write it out by way of a recap for yourself on what we've been through, so that just to lock it in. But either way, it's all good. If you're going to do it, whichever way you do it, it don't really matter. So,
and I do, last time we went through the list of things. I mean, that was a really interesting exercise to just list out conceptions that I've come to associate with diplomacy now, so far in the course. That was really interesting to pick out the things that jumped sort of immediately to mind. Thinking about diplomacy, because for me, the first one I had in my list was like nobility or nobleness.
There you go. Exactly.
I mean, starting at the beginning of this course, that's not something that I would have expected to be something that I really associated with diplomacy. So it was interesting to kind of pull out different things that are a big connected dot for me.
Very cool. Very cool. So one of the upcoming projects for me, and I was kind of waiting until Kay finished Wave Impeccability, you know, she's fairly close, but when she does, I will then go back to everybody and say, please send me your current dictionaries of power. Right now, some of those are going to have to be, they're handwritten, and either they're going to have to type it or they send me photos and I'll have to type it. Doesn't matter, either way. But what I then will do is what I've done before. I did it with all the stuff that I pulled out of my reading, particularly in the Carlos books. I put it into a spreadsheet with different columns, and then I would tag it, right? You know, like a tag with sort of letters, abbreviation, you know, like D for dreaming or whatever. So in this case, I will tag it for, okay, you know, CDD and all of the different tags, right? And the different concepts too. So then I can take the entire dictionary of power. First of all, I can then sort it by the author, you know, okay, here's Erica's, here's all the different people. Then you sort them alphabetically and you see where they overlap. And then you sort them by subject, and that's cool too, right? Yep. And then you can see in terms of, okay, all the ones that apply to capital diplomacy of everybody. I think this will be a very cool, and then I will put it up in a way that, you know, make a separate course for it, where it can be accessed, in other words, so that you can see the different dictionaries, and then also use it where you can search for it, you know, as a database. So that'd be very cool, you know, and have it in a spreadsheet. I'll email the spreadsheet to everybody, so that you can use it as a master research list. And that's fascinating when you see stuff like that and you can search by subject. This is very, very, very powerful, you know. Yeah. It's very cool. It's very cool. Now, many of them, of course, going to overlap, but that's fine too. You know, it doesn't matter.
Right. It doesn't matter. Absolutely. Whoops, what was that?
Yeah. So sometimes things come up and like they relate to impeccability, even though the word impeccability isn't mentioned.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely.
Very cool. All right. So.
Okay, so we should be at module 4 now.
Yes. Application.
It's been several weeks now since I did this module, so I'm going to have to go back through and.
Oh, cool. This is where you were saying without application, what's the point? Ursula's take on it, right? That very direct way.
Yes. So yeah, I'm going to have to reacquaint myself with what all's going on here. But I remember I really liked the structure of this session with Biella's questions and started taking this through. It almost to me was like a brain dump of sorts, of sort of following the process of thinking. Like you start Biella sort of posing this question, and then you're almost seeing the process of her thinking it through, sort of amending things, you know, whatever. So I
a lot of nuance to it. A lot of nuance. So you know, on slide 3, the introduction, application is always our first and foremost focus. I don't know if you had anything on that or not before we to the Biella story there.
Right.
Yeah, it's very basic stuff. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, there's nothing really in this. It just says this is what we're going to now focus on using. Yeah. Okay. So it's nothing really.
And I think, to me, this reminds me of what I've heard you say many times about sort of quoting other people. Like we tend to attribute all this value to some quote that we think sounds really good, but unless it really means something specific to us and, you know, has some connection to us in particular, it doesn't really hold any value. So unless we're able to apply it, you know, really connect it to ourselves and apply it, it doesn't really mean anything. So
exactly, and that's where the ownership comes from. Why the quoting is so key, because when you own it, that's when you can more easily apply it. It's very difficult to apply something that's owned by somebody else. Very difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. That's true.
So this whole story, the reason I chose this particular one, because the diplomacy involved, what type of comments can make someone happy, that
Yeah.
immediately to me brings up capital diplomacy needed. Yeah.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Or the lack of understanding from the questioner
Right.
of the diplomacy involved, right? And they, because they're under an assumption that it's up to me to make them happy, right? Which is, again, that's a deep belief in people. It takes a lot of diplomacy to deal with it. Plus, sorry, just to lay out from the start here, Biala's dealing with this in correspondence.
Mhm.
So she needs to condense her diplomacy. She's not dealing with the person live. So that makes it even more difficult.
I think that's something that's brought up in the tasks, if I remember.
Yeah, probably. I don't remember either. So, all right, let's go through it. It's fun that you haven't done it for a while. It's nice to come back afterwards. Very cool. Very cool.
I know, and I always find it interesting when this has happened before. It's like I'm reading. I know I'm reading my own words, but it's like past me left this little note for current me, and it's like I'm.
Yes, I love that. And I get surprised by myself. It's like, wow, okay, good one. So you're like, wow, that's pretty interesting. What the hell were you thinking there? A lot of times the tasks and exercises, I really have to think, what the hell was it all about? And I have to really work it out from scratch. I'm like, what on earth? But it's cool. It's very cool to do.
Absolutely.
So,
speaking of notes I left from past self, I think each of these quote sections, I had bolded some specific things that Biela said that really kind of stood out to me.
Fantastic. Now that's an exercise for somebody at some point.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I want somebody to go through the Biela book and pull out all of the quotes.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That would be interesting. So in the specific CD application section under assimilation, the first section, Biela is talking about comments which are rooted in positive realism. And I had highlighted or bolded, we learn to tell the truth of matters, even if they may be uncomfortable or not so pleasant, but in positive, pleasing, and acceptable ways.
Yes.
And this was a really interesting concept to me because, as per usual, in my practical application brain, sort of the first thing, and I think throughout this, no, and I feel like almost, I'm probably by design, no specific examples are given of like what positive realism would be. And so, I read through this whole thing, and basically the first note that I made, or the only note that I made in my takeaway from this section was, I would love to run through some actual examples of what this kind of positive.
Okay, fantastic.
Because it was so, I feel like this happens to me, or I don't think it did as much in way of impeccability, but in the Mornis project, this has been like an ongoing thing for me where I come across this concept and I'm like, okay, this is really interesting.
I love it.
And I'm like, okay, I want to know how to do,
I love it. Okay, this is brilliant. All right. So, an example of positive realism.
Yes.
Let's look at positive unrealism.
Okay.
Which is this, when you see the posts in the group, somebody, overly optimistic and, pie in the sky mindset, where they say, you perfect as you are.
Yeah.
Right. And that's positive unrealism. You're not perfect as you are, right? But I see posts like this on a regular basis. Just accept yourself as who you are. No, I don't accept myself as who I am, and I don't wish to either, because I wish to improve from where I are. Now, that doesn't mean that I am broken, right? And one of the more recent posts was, you don't need to be fixed. You're okay as you are. Well, they said you're perfect as you are. It's a big difference to say you're okay as you are. And improving is part of, you can have something that doesn't need to be fixed. But like my car works fine, but it doesn't mean that I can't take it to the customized shop and get a nice fancy paint job and put on, springs or whatever. It doesn't mean I cannot enhance my car. It doesn't need it, but I like it, right? So this is positive realism, is to say that we want to express things in such a way that we are pointing out the realisticness of it, but also in a positive way without being unrealistic. That's the key, right? So if we see positive realism as avoiding unrealism, it starts to make a lot more sense. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. All
So,
right.
so when I look at this point, okay, when somebody says, you don't need to be fixed, you're perfect as you are, that's unrealistic because you're not perfect, right? But also there is some realism to it that you don't need to be fixed. Now, well, maybe for some people they kind of do in a sense, right? It doesn't always apply. If I'm mentally ill and there is some fixing that's potentially needed, but for most people not. So we say, what is the realisticness of this? I can say yes. Just because I want to improve doesn't mean I'm broken. That's my realism. So
Right.
the fact that I understand that I can improve and that I'm okay as I am, in other words, I am enough and I am also more. That right there is an absolute example of positive realism.
That
Yes.
makes perfect
Yeah.
sense.
So let's look at it. Let's look at positive realism in a different way, because again, I think it's just a terminology. It's doableness.
Yeah.
So when you look at it from your point of view, anything from an application point of view, is this doable? Well, if it's doable and also is it positive and an improvement, growth, movement, progression. Well, if it's doable, then it's realistic. And if it's an improvement, if it's growth, if it's moreness, well, then it's positive. So,
Right.
not everything is about improvement.
Right.
Moreness is just about joy. I don't need to improve to be more connected to more joy.
Yeah.
Right? Positive realism again. See?
Absolutely.
So in that context, you could say, well, okay, you're perfect. You have the tools for joy. And you just need to use them, right?
Yeah.
All right. So let's look at other examples of positive realism.
I really like that concept of moreness not being about
Improvement.
It's about sort of bonus joy, bonus goodness.
Exactly. It's about access. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So in Biala's context here of positive realism, it's we learn to tell the truth of matters, even if they may be uncomfortable or not so pleasant, but in positive, pleasing, and acceptable ways. All right. So let's take an example of something that might come up where we need to share. Where I'm trying to think of something that comes up fairly regularly. Well, all right. I get this all the time. People message me and they want to know where I'm from.
Okay.
And also they want pictures of me. Like, I got to send them a photo.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. I get that a lot. So now, I don't know. I'm assuming there's some sort of version of inappropriateness involved. I tend to not pay attention to it in that way. I skirt around it because now I try to say, look, first of all, sometimes like today I had somebody who asked us and they seem to be genuinely interested in moreness and how to live magical. A lot of times it's just somebody who's trying to solicit me for some reason, and it's just online sex or something, and they're trying to get an in there, because if they ask for my picture, well, the next thing they've opened the door for me asking them for theirs, right? Now it's not something that I'm involved with, but in this case, I'm not sure what the intent is. So now I have to be a bit diplomatic. I didn't get into the conversation, but I have before. So then instead of me trying to break it to them to say, look, stop trying to solicit me or whatever. Not that it's that I'm quite happy to say this directly, but let's just say somebody's kind of half and half, that she is in this particular business, She is trying to solicit me, but also she wants more in her life, both together, right? So I don't want her to say, leave me alone. I'm not a customer. It's not my thing, whatever. Or I just block them. I don't even bother to say that. So, but now I have this dilemma a little bit. So then I would, for instance, to break it to them nicely, to say, if I do share my picture with you, I'm not helping you. I'm not doing you a favor, because my picture and where I'm from and all of these personal details, they don't actually give you a representation and an idea of who I really am. It's misleading, right?
Right.
So if you want to know me, go to my timeline and read all my articles. That'll really get you to, then you really know me, really and truly. Anything else is a misleading idea. And the example that I use, I say, yeah, but I really want to know you and all this. I say, yeah, you know what? Where I grew up is the exact same place as where my brother grew up.
Mm-hmm.
We had the exact same parents. We went to the same schools. We did a lot of the same stuff. Everything in our lives were the same. But my brother and I are completely and utterly different people.
Right.
One extreme to the other. So what are you going to benefit from knowing this? Right? I'm sure there are probably people in the world who look somewhat similar to me and who come from the same country. I know there are millions of those. It doesn't tell you about me. It's misleading information, because you're going to have an idea about this country. Furthermore, what you are asking online, you have no way of verifying the information that I tell you is true. I could tell you, I'm from Brazil or Tibet. How are you going to know?
Right. Right.
No way of knowing, So the very fact that you're asking already, so there's my positive realism to tell them, look, don't be inappropriate and don't be, again, sometimes they're asking me because they've got a bit of a crush or they've got a bit of a hero worship thing going on. And that's utterly inappropriate. And I wish to squelch that under all conditions, right? This is utterly a no-no. But I want to say directly to them, look, you need to get a bit more confidence in yourself, and you need to rely on yourself and not look at other people and all that. I don't have that license. So I do it in a nice, gentle way to say, it's not going to give you this information. So that's, positive realism, to say, be realistic here. You're not going to get what you want out of this. And then they're like, kind of, well, but a lot of them can't let go of it, They have to know where you're from and how old you are. It's amazing. And not just women. I mean, I had this mostly from guys, actually, too.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting.
It's fascinating to me how this was just so absolutely essential to them.
Yes.
Yeah. But, most of that, too, it's them wanting the reverse question.
True.
Because they want you to ask them for the same thing. So for some reason, where they're from and their age is something very important to them.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah. So really, positive realism is just taking whatever the circumstance is, breaking it down to its constituent elements. Yes. Understanding the deeper underlying motivation or intent involved, and then rephrasing in order to satisfy the intent. And now, not just theirs, but mine. My intent is to not satisfy their intent sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So instead of saying directly, I come at it indirectly. So it really is just about roundaboutness, but also in a way that, like when I say, look, it doesn't give you any information about me, really, it's misleading information. That's real, that's realistic. But I'm being positive about breaking the news to them that they are putting all of their hopes and ideas into something that's really shallow.
Right.
Yeah. So it's just, I guess, it's the creativity of alternative solutions. I think in security, this probably came up a lot, right? Anytime you've got some sort of a security problem that needs to be taken care of, the coders or you in charge of the whole thing, there was probably a dozen or more, multiple ways of dealing with it. It's not one specific task, right? So you can come at it in many different ways. That flexibility of knowing that there are multiple solutions to the same problem, this is exactly what positive realism is. Yeah. As soon as you come up with your first and instinctual to say, look, stop being an nincompoop here and, come on, grow up, seriously, I mean, this whole hero worship thing is just childish. That's what I'm thinking. But I realize to say that is undiplomatic, and it's not very helpful. Sometimes I can be direct like that if need be. as appropriate. But it's just to say, okay, what is an alternative way that I can solve this problem?
Yeah. Yeah. I like that.
That's what positive realism really is. It's simply making that effort to come at it from a different angle. Makes
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it does.
And I think you have that creativity, right? To find many ways to solve your problem, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. Or to do anything. It's not just problem solving. Anything, you know. It's that's why I like the habit shifting or changing your routines. You learn to do things creatively and differently. It's very
Right.
useful mindset to have. Perspective shifting, especially when getting into the habit of looking for multiple perspectives. That's it. You automatically come up with these alternative angles, and it's very simple. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that definitely makes sense.
And one of the techniques for coming to positive realism is to reverse engineer our thinking.
Mm,
Right. So, in the case of somebody who, they're being a nincompoop, and I'm trying to not say they are a nincompoop, I come at it from their angle, and I think from their brain where I'm at, and okay, I can't quite give them what they want, but I give them the next best thing. What will satisfy them? And then I work all the way from something, a substitute that will satisfy them, all the way back to me. You know what I mean?
okay.
Yeah. I can't give them what they want. So I say, what's the closest thing that they'll be more or less satisfied with,
Right.
or have to be satisfied with? And then I just work it back, okay, this is the thing itself, what I need to make a case for it. Because you can't just say it directly sometimes. You have to make a little bit of a preamble, right? And then you have to, before that, lay a foundation. And you have to sort of ease them into it. So then I just break it down into steps to gradually get them acquainted and customized and, at least accepting of it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
It's a very powerful technique that, yeah.
Absolutely.
Because that technique of saying, is this acceptable to them?
Right.
Right. And then I say, no, it's not. In that format, they're not prepared for it yet. Okay. So I need to have one step before that. And then one step more. And then you just keep breaking it down. Ah, yes. Okay. And then one step, once they're accustomed to one, then they're ready for the next. And then you just keep going. But to do it in reverse, very powerful. Very powerful. Because you know where you're going, you see?
Yeah.
It's very easy to do it in reverse. It's very, very simple.
Yeah. I like that. That makes perfect sense.
Yeah. I love doing that. When I don't know what to say to somebody, I just think, what would they accept? And then I just work backwards to make it acceptable. And I know that you cannot always do it in one jump. That's the key, right? To understand that people, they are capable and willing to accept things as long as you get there incrementally.
Yeah.
Or in acceptable jumps. It doesn't have to be in tiny increments, but it does have to be in packets, as it were. And that's a big part of diplomacy, is to make things acceptable. But you need to, the end point, where you want to go, but you start with something which is going to be acceptable, and you just keep building on that. You just keep building on that.
Absolutely. And I think that strategy, interestingly enough, I think is very effective for me on myself. Like,
Yes.
if I want
Yes.
a new habit or do something, I can strategize and do that to myself and go, okay, well, if I try to make this huge jump, that's going to be really hard, but I think I can accept this if I just start with this little bit and
Exactly.
then myself
Yes.
to
Yes, Erica, absolutely big, huge, great, big yes. This concept of I is more than one. We have all of our aspects. Sometimes we need to apply this positive realism and incremental change and selling a concept to ourselves. You're essentially almost using trickery with yourself sometimes, because they're very childish, those things. And they will accept the truth, but you need to get into it in a way that's acceptable to them. It's fantastic. It's fantastic. I mean, I know I'm essentially, to myself, my bigger self, man, this is such childish bullshit that I'm having to talk to myself about. But I present the little steps and they swallow it and they buy it and they're all happy. It's too amazing. It's too amazing.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Aspect management. This is a big, big, big deal. very big deal. And to realize that, you know, our aspects they put a lot of pressure on us. So
Yeah.
for instance, if you look at, you know, somebody with OCD, right, how they are dominated, that aspect has come to dominate, you know, like in the TV series Monk, right?
Yes.
The detective, it's completely dominant. Now it also, of course, makes him a good detective because he needs to get that, he can't give up on it till it's exactly right and that all the pieces fit. And that necessity for order is what makes him put all of the pieces into the puzzle and find the solution, right? So it works for him. But that's where that aspect has come to predominate, and he needs physical solutions because it's so overwhelming. However, when you only have a little bit of a Mr. A like him, it's not overblown. The way to manage it is to satisfy Mr. A virtually. You don't need to do it physically. In other words, I don't need to arrange my keyboard and put it nice and have my desk all. I can do it in my mind, and it satisfies Mr. A just as well. Now, also, when we understand emphasis, it
Mhm.
is then too to train Mr. A to accept that order as being okay. There you go, Mr. A. See, I straightened my table here, which I now am literally doing. I made everything neat and tidy, and I
Right.
say, there you go. That's the best you're gonna get. Accept it. So I train Mr. A to always accept less than 100%.
Yeah.
Right? Now, in the case of somebody like a monk, they are always trying to pursue that 100% and they get stuck in it. So they have to do it exactly and precisely. And sometimes people really get stuck with this, you know, where they do it over and over and over again. They cannot achieve the 100%, and then they get lost in that loop. But if they had started initially when Mr. A come up and said, look, yes, fine, you're a pain in the ass. I'm doing this to satisfy you. Get off my back. And I do it, and there you go. All right, be satisfied. That's the best you're going to get. They accept it, and after a while, they get less rigid in their demands. And this is very, very, very powerful management technique. Very, very powerful.
Yeah.
Very useful to know, by the way, for perfectionism.
Mhm.
Very, very powerful. We can train it to be less and less stressful. Now, I don't want to completely undo Mr. A because he's so useful in so many aspects, right? So I manage Mr. A.
Mhm.
That's key. You know, that's the whole book that I will write at some point, Managing Mr. A. It's very, very powerful. And because, like I said, I get the best out of him. And sometimes I give him a bit of a license, I give him some head, and he goes wild with his precision because I need it. Other times I'm like, you know, chill, dude, not in this case. You'll get it in other things. And that alone is enough to keep him satisfied.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. The suppression of these things leads to wanting more. Yeah. So you got to feed him when it's appropriate,
Right.
starve him when it's appropriate. Very powerful. All right, very cool. Very cool. But
I
it's
like-
part of the same thinking, right? Sorry, it's the same abstract psychology of thinking, the flexibility of appropriateness to
Right.
say, you know, a one path for one instance, another path for another instance. It's all part of our capital D diplomacy.
Yeah.
It's finding alternative routes. And when we see that, you know, in any circumstance, there are many, many, many routes to the same end. That's part of our psychology that we want to develop. Positive realism is precisely that, finding an alternative route. Yes?
Okay.
Which is, you know, part of the repeat backs is precisely to develop that in your brain. Every single time you're doing a repeat back, you are saying there's an alternative way of expressing this.
Right. Right.
So it's part of, you know, my subtlety of when doing the program as intended, there are consequences to it that are profound. You're training your brain in many, many different ways, not just expression, not just the ability to own things and making it your own, just a simple thing of repeat backs. It also trains the brain to look for alternative pathways. Now, if I were to really put some pressure on, and at some point I will do this, you know, take some a quote or a poem or something, you know, something that has some nice depth and say, give me at least 6
Mm-hmm.
repeat backs on it.
Yeah.
Each one different, right? And now it's like, wow, oh, okay, ooh, one is but multiple. It's a profound, profound psychological exercise to develop.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that.
Yeah, yeah. I used to love a game of cards that we played as kids. It was called Double Patience.
Mm.
Yeah, it's played with 2 decks of cards. Now I'm trying to remember exactly how it works. I think you put 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 4 and 4 down in a line between each other. And
Okay.
then each one has the deck of cards, and then you've got to build them out into the full. You want to end up with a king in the space.
Okay.
And then so so we put them out. If I go first, and there's a let's say there's a red 4 and a black 3, because I think you had to do it alternatively like that, right? So let's say a black 4, red 3, and then 2 other cards just on the one side. I could take the 3 and take it out of that space and put it on the 4.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So then I've got a free space which I can leave open or fill with something. And the idea is for the one to first use up all of your cards to get it out. But you build it out into a full deck. But I think you can only put a king in the free space.
Okay.
I remember that. No, or can you? No. You could put things in the free space. But the point I'm trying to make is that as you play and the decks get a little bit longer, sometimes you've got to sort of unpack a deck to get to things, and then half of it, like, use the space. All right, so if I've got that 4 and the 3, and then maybe a 2 gets added to it, but now I want to put it onto a 5, I cannot do it directly. I can't take the whole line. I've got to put the 2 in the space, and I put the 3 on another black 4, then move the 5, and then put it all back again. You see?
Okay.
Yeah. So then I've now because that original was, now I've got 2 free spaces. You see what I mean? And so you always sort of unpacking and repacking, but it required you to do things in alternative ways. It was always a game of alternative strategies. So I love that game. It was a very, very cool card game.
Yeah, it sounds interesting.
Yeah, because you had to think strategically. And you had to anticipate and plot and plan, and sort of see that there's multiple moves. You couldn't just play blindly. You had to really think. So it was a game of strategy, and particularly it was a game of doing things in different ways. You couldn't do it directly, and I love that. It's very cool, very cool. Yeah. So if ever you play card games, I don't know if it will Double Patience. That's just what we called it, but anyway. Let me know. I'll look it up for you to find it.
I like it.
Yeah.
Sounds super interesting.
I like games that train us to think differently.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a creativity to that. So it was a very cool game. Yeah.
Absolutely. I like it. Let's see.
So before you move further, this, examples of positive realism. Yeah. You okay with that?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Perfect. I appreciate it.
I think you used positive realism when there was that time where you and Joe and Kay, you were like Kay talking during the programs or whatever, right? Watching TV and that the uncomfortable stuff that you had to share with Kay. Right? You had to be real about it. You couldn't ignore it, but you shared the issue in a very positive way. You were positive and real at both at the same time. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you have applied it, because I remember you doing it at the time. It was no big deal at all. Right?
I have applied it. I definitely have applied it in many circumstances. I think now that I have examples of what.
Yeah.
Means. And I think it's interesting because I think for me, this is something that I tried or sort of wanted to apply a lot when I was younger, but didn't really understand how or couldn't see a way to do it in a really, truly realistic way. So I think I settled a lot for placating, just trying to get everybody back to a place of comfort and peace and whatever, knowing that I wanted to say, I wanted to be able to get this point out there that I felt needed to be said, but I didn't know how to do it in a way that was truly going to be acceptable. So I went kind of roundabout different ways. But yeah, this makes perfect sense. This concept of walking this fine line of being able to appropriately state a truth that really needs to be stated, while also having it be acceptable and something that has a chance of making it past the other person's ego, fault, whatever, being able to make it through all of these layers of defense that we put up to potentially plant that seed of, alternative thinking in there.
Yes. So positive realism in the context of capital D diplomacy, we could, when you put, if we were to make an algorithm out of it, right? Positive realism in the context of capital D diplomacy equals ethical selling.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Right? That's what we're doing, really. We are selling a concept to somebody, but because we are ethical and it's coming from our nobility and our sensibility, we are being kind, right? And our kindness, that's it. Our kindness our ethics is kindness, really. We are presenting the truth, which is an awful truth in a pleasant way, but it's selling it, right? That's what selling is, isn't it? In the most concepts, you are trying to get somebody to do something that they're reluctant to do. And most of the time, people are reluctant to deal with the awful truth. That's why it's awful to them. So we sell it to them in a palatable way. That's our nobility. That's what capital E diplomacy is. It's getting them to come to something. It takes time and energy in a roundabout way. But it's ethical selling, right? Different way to say it.
Absolutely.
But it's also a kind, courteous, and considerate selling.
Right.
Yeah?
It is really interesting to me that I know that I do. I mean, just what I was saying earlier, I know
you do it automatically.
myself all the time. I do this to myself all the time, where there's something that I really don't want to do. And I mean, it was kind of like, I've done that a lot with exercising in the past. Like, that was really why I started ballet, because I knew that I wanted to do something that got me moving, that was taking care of my body, but I know that I hate exercising just for the—
There you go. So you tricked yourself.
Tricked myself to, like, well, you know what, maybe I can get my exercise in if I do something like ballet, because then it's something creative, it's fun, it's not just exercising, there's another element to it. I mean, I do this to myself all the time. That's really
so ethical selling, positive realism, capital E diplomacy, a key psychology is to enable all of those is the absolute knowing that there are alternative ways of doing things. Right? This is absolutely key. I mean, the R is that they exist. This has to be emphasized.
Right.
Because let's say when you were very young as a kid, you kind of didn't like the way that you were doing it, but you weren't necessarily convinced that there is an alternative way. Right? And slowly over time, you got to realize that. But had you had that absolute conviction that there is a different way, you would have spent more time finding that way. Yes? Yeah. So this is absolutely essential in our capital D diplomacy psychology, to know that there is a way. We just have to find it.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's not just for capital D diplomacy, but communication. And of course, capital D diplomacy is so entrenched with communication. It's the same thing.
Right.
So positive realism, we could say, is simply an alternative communication strategy.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Absolutely.
all it is.
Absolutely. That is interesting because I was thinking about this over the last few days since we talked last, that one of the things that has really stood out to me as an important knowing that has come out of all of this new activity with the smiley face symbol and all of that stuff, and looking back on, realizing how much I've changed my thinking about what happened before, and being able to look back on this experience differently. I think I said in a previous discussion about this that one of the things that came out of it for me was this sort of specific self-trust of being able to trust myself, my own knowings, my feelings to a certain extent. And that was really big for me. And that's been one of the big things for me that I was thinking about the other day that has really been a gift, I think, of this particular knowing and experience, and the timing. I mean, the timing of this coming back up and catching my attention was so perfect in terms of where I'm at in my learning process right now, the things that are really top of my mind right now, the shadow work that Bina and I were talking about, all of that has culminated in my ability to see what happened in the past and sort of what has been happening in the last few weeks with seeing all this stuff again, to see that in a really specific way and get a really specific understanding of things. And one of the things that has come out of that has been this concept that there things that we think are impossible, or that could never be, that could never work, I'm obviously
Absolute.
whatever. Yeah, that it doesn't, that's not true. I mean, this whole idea that virtually anything is possible anytime that we find ourselves in a situation where we feel like there is no option, there is nothing else I can do.
Exactly.
There is, because if something as outlandish as some of the things that have happened for me have happened, and then I come to this thing that literally like spells it out for me that, this can't keep telling yourself that you're crazy because too many of these things line up. It's this perfect understanding for me that really is true, that literally anything is possible. And even if something seems completely outlandish, totally impossible, like a complete impossibility, it's not, it doesn't
exactly it simply sometimes requires a rearrangement of the elements that we have, like I explained about the sailing into the wind, right?
Yes.
I love that, the genius of it. And by solving that problem, he not only solved it, but like I said, that first design they made, it goes faster into the wind. It's fantastic.
Right.
That just blows my mind. It's going directly into the wind, but it's going faster than the speed of the wind coming at it. How incredible is that? Leverage. That was all about leverage, right? Using the things, the elements that you had, simply rearranging it, right? And using leverage. That was the key. So when we look at this from a more abstract, magical perception, take what you have, rearrange it, and sometimes you'll find, that's all that's needed, really. So that's what positive realism is. Taking your concepts, rearranging.
Absolutely. Well, and I think one of the things that came up for me the other day when I was thinking about all of this again was unsurprisingly, I went back to the concept of trust. And I think I said the other day that one of the things that really stuck out to me in this situation was about this specific understanding of a sort of new view of self-trust in all of this that, we've talked about, and I think we talked about this the other day, we've talked about this many times, about sort of the complicated nuance of feelings and trusting your feelings, and how you still need to think, we can't just sort of blindly accept our feelings because there's too much involved there. It needs to be combined with thinking things through. We need to think feelings. We can't just trust feelings alone.
Yes.
This was such a really interesting specific example of, just because, and I think I said this to Kathy, that I sort of tend to swing between extremes, I think, with feelings. And sometimes I'll get really caught up in a specific feeling and think, oh, like, I don't need to think this through, this just feels right. But other times I think, if this is just a feeling, it's, well, if I have nothing else to base this on or whatever, this is worthless, throw it away. This can't be right. I can't trust this because it's just a feeling, and that's so fleeting and whatever. And this was a really interesting example for me of sort of learning. I think for me, one of the things was learning the process of how to think feelings through, and how to learn to trust feelings appropriately, and what feelings that can be trusted sort of feel like, like coming to a place of knowing my own knowings, basically.
Yes.
Learning the difference between a feeling and a knowing, like a capital K knowing. And that certain things for me are capital K knowings, and I've had trouble distinguishing between, well, what's just a feeling. And it was a great opportunity to go, okay, I have a very specific example of a knowing that now I understand what a knowing is for me, like what it looks like and feels like, and everything for me. And one of the things that came up with that was self-trust, and trusting your knowings and trusting myself. And one of the things that stuck out to me was, I think I said this, I know I've said this in the past, but this really came up again over the last couple of days for me in a big way, that capital T trust for me is truly rooted in a foundation of self-trust. And that trust, capital T, for example, this is a kind of silly example, but one thing for me that feels like a kind of knowing was this concept of needing to go overseas. And so this is one of those things that for me sort of goes beyond just a typical feeling, or oh, I would love to do that.
It's a knowing.
This is a knowing. This is a deeper thing than that. It is some kind of deeper understanding of mine that this is something that is important to me. It is an important part of my journey, and this is something that I need to do for me. And for me right now, I have no idea where we're going to go, when we're going to go, how we're going to get there, how this is going to work. At this particular point in our life, Joe has no prospects of a job overseas. We have no concept of how this would work. But that's part of where the trust thing comes in, because I'm doing all of this learning growth. I'm doing all of the things that I know I need to be doing to keep myself on this path of growth. And so I'm doing everything that I possibly can that's within my control to do. And the capital T trust comes in part because of my self-trust of my knowing. I know.
Yes.
Knowing. And so I have to have trust, capital T trust, that the rest of it is going to work out.
Exactly.
I don't have all the answers for how, but I know this is a knowing. And if I trust that knowing, then capital T trust becomes a natural part of that gap between what I can do and getting to the ultimate goal.
Yes.
So that was this huge, like, I had said that before.
That's fantastic. Now,
self-trust was this like really foundational concept for me in capital T trust, that I need to have this certain level of self-trust in order for capital T trust to work. But this was such a good example for me of how that works in my experience.
would you say that this is all absolutely falling into place and it works because the trust is not in isolation? It is connected to everything else, right? I mean, trust is connected, of course, to impeccability. It's foundational, but also discipline, forbearance, timing, right? All of that, you trust that the timing will come.
Right.
Cheryl had a magic little quote on this. Said, timing is always on time. Yes. I love that. It's so obvious, but that's the point. Trust is to trust that timing is always on time. That's what makes it timing. So, but in order to get there, sometimes we have to be, patient, and we have to be disciplined. Sometimes we need to forbear a little bit. But if we're truly patient, then forbearance doesn't become an issue. Like right now, some people could be in your situation and be stressing, but you're like, hey, it's going to come when it's coming. I'm going to enjoy what I'm doing in the meantime. It's not a problem. So that's all. There's a connectivity to trust, though. It's not in isolation. It connects to everything. All of our core foundational conceptions and being and all that's all connected, right?
Well, and I think that was one of the big pieces that really clicked into place for me, was that, again, for me, all of that is based on a knowing, not a belief, a knowing, because timing is always on time. Trusting that, all of this stuff is going to come appropriately. I mean, whatever you're doing, all of that is predicated by a knowing that we each have as individuals of what is good, right, appropriate, what we think is going to happen.
Yes.
I wouldn't have a reason to trust that everything is going to work out if I didn't have a knowing that was the case.
Yes. And for me, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, no, just I think that was this huge piece that clicked into place for me, was like, once I come to a real knowing, not just a belief, and maybe that's a thing for me, is a knowing for me is maybe what started as a belief, but is something that I have thought through, gathered real evidence for myself, that I have a reason to trust this. I mean, I'm not going to enter in a trust commitment if I don't have a reason to believe this is true. So there's something that's happened with this belief, whether it's my own thinking things through, that has shifted this into a knowing for me. And once this point of knowing, my self-trust in my own knowings, in my own abilities, in my ability to think things through, in all of these things, naturally makes the capital T trust part of this equation just happen, because this is a real knowing for me, and I know that I don't know everything. I don't have all the answers. I can't make all this stuff happen, but it's a real knowing for me. Then there's trust that's going to come in and fill in that gap of all of the unknown. It's like an inevitability at that point.
Yes. And the reason for it all is your application of the tools. The way you've done repeat backs and takeaways, plus perspective shifting, plus thinking things through to the end, right? All of those combined has led to the resolution of feeling and believing each into something that has objective value and merit to you. That are not dependent on either belief or feeling. That third option, because of thinking it through to the end, perspective shifting, takeaways, repeat backs, all of those tools through the application that you've done so incredibly wonderfully, right? The end result has been this trust, which is the knowing, right? Because that you've been thorough, you've resolved feeling and believing belief and feeling, you've resolved it into knowing, right? And that's a big deal. So next thing that I'm very keen to do, I don't know, have you gotten to the end of module 4 with family diplomacy in your takeaways and tasks and exercises, or not yet?
I don't I don't think so.
Okay. Well, regardless, if it's not finished, finish it. If it is finished, the next thing to do is do the feeling and believing course.
Right.
It's very short, it's very small, it's very quick. It's only 2 modules, there's not much to it, but it's absolutely going to go into detail about precisely what you were just talking about, the resolution of feelings and beliefs into knowings, right? It doesn't actually use that terminology, but it's to understand the relationship. Right. So it's quick, do it, and this will be very helpful in just locking in and consolidating what you already know, but it would just give you a greater perspective on yourself, and it'll be very useful, right? I mean, you already know it. This is just to consolidate the knowing. Right. Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. Exciting stuff, Erica. Very exciting stuff.
Let's see. Trust me. Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. All right, I was trying to make a note before I forgot what I was thinking.
Good.
Where did my notes go? There we
go. So this resolution into knowing, one of the core components is your diligence.
Right, absolutely.
You have been exceedingly diligent in thinking things through, going over them, exploring, extrapolating, extending, understanding, figuring it out, connecting it back again. And we keep doing this. It's an ever ongoing process, right? It doesn't just happen once. In order to really lock in truly new knowings, it requires multiple redoings in different routes and different paths, which is what we are doing in the greater abstract every time we come on, right? Yeah, we say the same thing differently, but it's part of that bigger process to really get it into a knowing. It requires quite a lot of doing to get knowings to be lasting knowings. There's one thing between a temporary knowing and a lasting knowing, yes?
Absolutely.
Very cool. Keep going. Love it. Magical
thing. Okay. Next thing was from Biela's second quote or paragraph. Through this kind of interpersonal diplomacy, we get to make others happy by being real and genuine, doing so in a positive and pleasant way. And I had highlighted that or bolded it or whatever. I mean, in part because that to me summed up kind of this point of what was being made in, or the point that was being made in this particular paragraph, but also, and it ended up, coming up in the exercise about her verbiage there of, by doing this, we get to make others happy. And, that comes up in the exercises of, what's potentially problematic in the way that this is phrased. And that caught my attention, when I was first going through it. So that was interesting. And that gets brought up in the exercises and talks about what's.
Yes. So I think one of the tasks, if I remember, was where is Biela perhaps a little undiplomatic, or, where, so really that statement should in this way, right, through this kind of interpersonal diplomacy, we get to make others happy by being real and genuine, right? It needs to be in inverted commas, but the reason that she does that and doesn't put it in inverted commas, is because she's knowing her audience, right?
Right.
They are so in this belief that you need to make others happy that she utilizes it to draw them as a pull, so that they at least listen to what she's got to say.
And to me, the way this whole thing is structured is itself an example of positive realism, because
Exactly.
Ella
Exactly.
dropped some serious truths here, but it has to be palatable
Exactly.
to the person who's asking the
Exactly.
question, how do we make others happy? And if you start out
Exactly.
by saying, we can't
Right.
make others happy, then they're just going to shut off
Yeah.
and not listen
Right.
to.
So Biella knows that her realism says, I've got to be real in this, that I cannot communicate the fullness of what I wish to say 100% accurately. I know there's going to be some misperceptions here. I've got to live with some of them. I would rather communicate a partialness, and there is some communication, than fail completely. Right? If I were to just share it the way I would to a fellow new noble, it's not going to connect. Because to say, well, but making others happy, forget about it. That's not an ideal in life. It's a negative. It goes contrary to everything. It's actually, they can say, what do you mean? I've been taught all my life, making others happy is what makes me a good person. This is the point and purpose of life, right? So she's leveraging this deep, unfortunate misperception and that square circleness of it to come at it as best she can, right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
So her positive realism is to say it's as best I can within the context of the circumstance, right?
Absolutely.
So realism for me, I remember staying with my brother at one point. After we'd left school already, staying together in another city and everything. It wasn't for very long, but he's a bit of a slob. So I'm like, say, dude, can you at least try to keep the things organized?
Right.
And he said, that's what I like about you. You're realistic, and that was positive realism, to say, at least can you try? Not will you, or this is come on, you're such a slob, just complaining about it. But I asked him to try. So positive realism. There's a nice example for you, by the way. See, my brain was still thinking of examples.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, the next.
Of course, I said it with a smile, which also adds some positivity, right?
Right. Absolutely.
But I had no real much expectation that he would become neat.
Right.
But at least he heard my complaint.
Right.
That was the important part. Okay, don't be so gross in it. Even a little bit of an improvement would be an improvement.
Right. Absolutely. Okay, next sections that I had highlighted. Comments are a bonus, a free gift or addition. Yeah. And then we share instead of trying to specifically do something. Our sharing thus becomes a free gift. Yeah. And I thought especially that was such an interesting, the way that's worded is so, it stands out so much to me that we share, basically sharing is implied here to be an alternative to a doing.
Exactly.
It's also not, when I'm thinking about what sharing is, it can be a being, right? We can share a being, but it's not necessarily always a being, which for me was really interesting because that slots sharing into a very specific other sort of category in this sense. It's not a doing here that we're talking about, not necessarily a being that we're talking about. It's an other, and that the other is that it's a free gift. It's this, this interesting thing that sits outside our typical binary conception of doing and being. There's doing, there's being, and then there's free gifts,
Yes. And see now, where she said to make others happy. Okay, that was in the previous slide. She's now moved quite radically away from that in a very subtle way, right? So when you make someone happy, the implied implication and associated action is to do something for somebody, give them a gift, tell them something nice about themselves, right? That's direct. Again, when you say something nice, you're assuming that this is what they want to hear, and it will actually make them happy. But now she's saying, when you do it in this way, by sharing and you are in the free gift, they get to choose. But now you aren't specifically making them happy. When it's a free gift, they make themselves happy by implication. Very subtle, very nuanced, right? But again, when we understand, as Biela does here, she understands that we are all geniuses at implication, even when we don't realize it. She's trusting this genius at implication to do its own magic, right? It already did. She knows the person has implication as part of their mindset through their very question. What do we do to make others happy? There's implications involved in just the question alone, right? So by implication, they have this belief that they can make somebody happy. They just don't know how, right? So she has to deal with that impliedness of that psychology. Right. Very powerful stuff, right? So we leverage implication as part of our capability diplomacy.
Right. Yes, absolutely.
Boy, I enjoyed that takeaway of the slide. You know, that nuanced, layered unpacking of it. Right. Yes, this is powerful stuff. This is what we're aiming for. Right. You know, from a nobility point of view. You know, that's why I so enjoy writing Biela, because she's very, very sophisticated, but she's also very gentle and kind and courteous and considerate. And, you know, she goes to these extreme lengths. You know, I mean, she's yes, I do strive to try and get as close to Biela as I can. But, you know, it's a lot of effort involved in doing this. So, you know, and it's not, now I will say something about Biela. This article wasn't written and constructed like, you know, you sometimes when you see poetry and they go over all the drafts of the poets, right? And they write one and then they change it and they tweak it and they get to another. This is free flow. You know, the only editing here is in grammar and punctuation, right? So I do try to at least channel Biela rather than, you know, construct this artificiality of somebody who is, you know, you've constructed it like a poem. You know, nobody speaks like poets. They don't organically speak that way. It's constructed. I don't want that, and I don't do that to Biela. I make every effort to have it be as organic as possible. Because to me, yes, I get into Biela's mindset, but I want it to be real. Maybe not every, you know, maybe the consistency of Biela in the overall is a bit unreal. That I can accept. Yes, that's fine. She's an ideal. But each individual expression of Biela is real.
Right.
That's very important to understand. You know, like this here, this just came out right away. You know, it's direct. There's no tweaking, there's no constructing it to suit the circumstances. What I'm trying to say. You know, it's Biela being thoughtful and coming out directly.
Right.
It's been a live conversation a little bit too. You know. So, of course, it's a bit more, you know, precise when it's written like this than it would be in a fluid natural conversation. So, very cool, very cool.
Okay, and then this is good. This will be a good stopping point. So the last thing that I had in my sort of takeaway section, and this fits perfectly with what you were just talking about, is the beginning of what she says in the last section. If we share our comments in such a way, the other person can take them as they will. That to me is a perfect summation of what you were just saying with the free gift concept, that it makes the comment a choice.
Yes.
When we share it in that way, it's something that they can take as they will. They don't have to accept it if they don't want to. And that, you know, if the positivity of our realism is clear, they'll be able to see our overall intent, the intent to be positive and real. And that, you know, that it's really important in this instance that this be a choice. Yes. It's not something that we can force on them. And, you know, the subtle nuance here of this overall concept that she's getting across, that we can't make someone else happy.
Exactly. Yes, that's the central point that she's dealing with. That's why I chose this, because I've got, I don't know, 60 or 70 Ask Biella articles. Why I chose, or of course I got all the writing. Why I chose this particular point of Biella, because that's the problem in her diplomacy, to undo this belief, this conviction that we need to make others happy. It's your point and purpose of life. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. But it's a big flawed, upside down philosophy of opposite belief. That's boy, what a challenge in a short article to deal with.
Absolutely.
I love this. Very cool. I'm looking very much forward to going through the rest of this. This is very cool. Yes. I'd completely forgotten that this was the last module. I thought it was something I'd forgotten it entirely. So yeah. But, one of my great joys is dissecting Biella, which is what you're doing here now. It is a great joy, and we are going to get there. There's more to it. So very cool. So yeah, when you're done with the rest of this, I don't know how much more there is there, but it's not, you're not at the end of the module yet. Yeah. So we're on slide 10 for your notes.
Okay.
Yeah. Or slide 11 is the next one.
Okay.
So yeah. So go till the end, which is you're halfway through, and then when you're done with that, go on to the feeling and believing. Yeah.
Okay.
Very cool. Very cool. I love it. Yeah, dissecting Biella is a particular joy.
Yes. Yeah.
And you're going to see when we come to dissecting Ursula and Camillus and the other characters, but particularly those three, it's a lot of fun. To that. Yeah. It's really powerful for expanding and entrenching our psychological sophistication. Right now, when we do these kind of discernments, especially in this context, we have some way of getting to a verification and a substantiation that our discernments, our perceptions, our discriminations are indeed accurate. Right now, when we apply this to people in general, we of course never can be sure. We are always acting on probability, and we know that yes, we are making a probable assessment. That is, no, probability is useful, but we don't rely on.
Right. Absolutely.
Which is what we are going to do the next thing. The way we take that probability, and we are now saying, how can I raise that probability to getting as close to 100% as is possible? And this is what capital H theory is all about. It is mechanisms for raising our probability rate. We never get to 100%, of course.
Right.
Absolutely to raise it. Whereas, from dealing with statistics, right? If you're dealing with your security and you've had, people tested, and they 99% of the time they don't get through. It's never 100%, or every single test that you've done, they don't get through. You don't assign it to be 100% secure, because you cannot. It's just your testers couldn't get through. But within your context, it's 99% safe, and you trust them, right? So this is where we're going. We're high percentage probability that we can trust, knowing it's generally true or almost always true, but we always keep that openness.
Right.
Always, yeah. But still, the capital H theory is about raising probability. Very cool. Very cool. Yeah. Very, very powerful techniques for application. But first, the feeling and believing. Yes. Okay, you gotta go. Fantastic. Just absolutely love it. Oh, by the way, when Joe doesn't come on the Fridays, it doesn't mean that you can't come.
I need to. The last couple of weeks, it worked out where something has come up, and I've ended up having to stay, do whatever.
Oh, so it was convenient for you too. Brilliant. I like that.
I know Fridays are always sort of hectic for me for some reason. So yeah.
No problem. I'm just saying, or in the times where Kay isn't here, you can come in her times too. I mean, you're more than welcome. It's really no problem.
I appreciate it.
Yeah. Which is Monday, Wednesdays, the same time as yours. So if you want to come on the Mondays and Wednesdays, not a problem. More than welcome.
Awesome.
Okay.
Right.
Brilliant. Brilliant. I love it. 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 Yeah. Okay. Fantastic. We'll see you when we see you.
Okay.
Bye bye. Bye bye, Eric.